is filing to have his January 6th trial start not in 138 days from now, but in April 2026. And presumably that is the date he and his attorneys have chosen because the 12th of never would not fit on the legal form. It is hilarious and megalomaniacal, and no, it is not a stretch. It is more like several dozen stretches. The proposed trial timeline is literally filled with long, empty stretches because Trump included a bar graph claiming that the height of the evidence that he has to go through and the other paperwork is 4,822 feet. Next to it is the height of the Washington Monument at 555 feet, and then the Statue of Liberty at 305 feet. And they went to all the trouble to make it on Microsoft Word with the 3D chart function, so the judge just has to agree with them, and the whole thing is funny and stupid and almost pitiable. And then you realize that at its heart, at its essence, this is evidence of the fact that Trump not only needs to be elected president for the sole purpose of not dying in prison, but that he would then have no possible motive to willingly surrender power ever, and no possible motive to leave office at the end of a God forbid second term in 2029, and that it was not a coincidence that in a post yesterday, he dog-whistled to his cult for political violence by repeating a phrase which he spoke just before he sent them into the Capitol to murder the Congress and the Senate and the Vice President and the democracy on January 6th. Quote, "Republicans have to be much tougher and smarter, or you won't have a party or country left." Unquote. The answer to Jack Smith's proposed case calendar should be a reminder that everybody else is running for president, but Trump is running for survival. And he has thus decided to run for dictator for life. There is no hyperbole in the use of that phrase, and that it is as obvious a decision to him, as necessary a goal, as simple a process as the decision would be for you to bring an umbrella with you if the forecast said it's going to rain. All the references to terminating the Constitution are not there to gin up the base, and all the mock campaign posters reading Trump 2028 and Trump 2032 and Trump 2044, they're not there to own the libs. To use the cliche of the moment, January 6th was not a bug but a feature. And while anybody else would learn from it, all he has learned from it is how to coup better next time. Before it was held, he didn't reveal or admit that he wouldn't accept the outcome of the 2020 election. He boasted that. As early as September 2016, he refused to say he would accept the outcome of the 2016 election. In February 2016, he demanded a new set of Iowa caucuses because he hadn't won the one they had just held. In November 2012, he not only called the re-election of Barack Obama a travesty, but actually, literally, and specifically called for insurrection. Quote, "We can't let this happen. We should march on Washington and stop this travesty." Unquote. Trump's attempt to end representative government in this country did not begin on January 6, 2021, or in his plot leading up to that coup. It is, at least, 11 years old, and we have to stop putting it out of our minds here and replacing the old sleepwalking mantra, "It can't happen here," with, "Well, it can't happen here again." Trump also cannot literally accept that he has lost. I once saw, this may be 30, 40 years ago, a compulsive talker interviewed on 60 Minutes, and the interviewer said, "Are you compelled to keep talking because you fear that if you stop, other people will insult you or laugh at you?" And the woman burst into tears and had to be helped up from the chair. Trump is like that. His existence depends on reinforcing his own confidence that he is infallible and omnipotent. This trial calendar proposed by Trump and his attorneys is his philosophy in miniature, and also it is his only means of survival in miniature. If anybody ever gets him to admit to others, to himself, sincerely, not just to deceive other people, that he has lost. I suspect he will stroke out, or at least be unable to function. He is the victim. He is the rightful ruler. He will be avenged. He will not accept a trial before the 2024 election. He will not accept a trial in 2025 because if he were to lose the election, he would be too busy in 2025 trying to overthrow the government from outside. And of course, he also wouldn't accept one in 2025 because if he were to win the election, he would be too busy in 2025 dismantling the various prosecutions against him. And, oh yeah, in the most cynical and manipulative part of this whole stall tactic, well, you can't criminally try a sitting president or a sitting dictator for life. The former Republican Congressman David Jolly, not exactly a flaming liberal, and so what if he was? Why would that make his analysis any less valid? It's like saying, well, he's a never-Trumper, so let me take a page from the America First fascist cult and assert Jesus would be a never-Trumper. David Jolly says, quote, if Trump gets reelected, all bets are off on the Constitution surviving the tests he'll throw at it. His movements would support anything he tries, regardless of constitutional provisions, unquote. And why would Jolly say that? In 2020, Trump was ready to turn the military on American citizens exercising their right to protest. And his toadies like Jeff Clark have said that's what the Insurrection Act is for. And only last month, Trump doxed Barack Obama, and one of his ad hoc stormtroopers went to the address to try to hunt Obama. And this week, Trump's minions doxed the grand jurors who indicted him in Atlanta, and he has praised every authoritarian state from China in 1990 to Russia 2023. And I know you all know this. But every week, sometimes every day, our collective desire to pretend we are safe causes these assaults against democracy to slip to back of mind, and we cannot continue to let down our guard in this way. This is a creature without morals or conscience or guilt. For decades, whatever he is, why ever he is this way, Trump has trained himself to study humans and their systems of business, of taxation, of contracts, of governance, and to find the loopholes and the places where custom and self-restraint have been mistaken for laws. There is no bottom. There is nothing to hold him back. There is no shame. In the battle of nerves, he cannot lose because he does not have any human nerves. His lawyers also wrote yesterday to Judge Eileen Cannon, saying she has a pretrial hearing in their case on December 11th, and now Jack Smith wants to start jury selection in D.C. on December 11th, and they want her to take, quote, appropriate action against Jack Smith and order the special counsel to explain its reasoning. They want a judge he appointed in one jurisdiction to interfere with a judge he did not appoint in another, like she is a hired hand, which is a decent description of her. And then the case calendar filing in Washington also says he'll need 4 to 6 weeks to present his defense in this trial. 4 to 6 weeks, and you may recall he has already promised to try to introduce into evidence somewhere an entire movie as evidence. I think it's called 2000 Jackasses, The Life of Dinesh D'Souza. The filing asking for the trial to begin not on January 2nd, 2024, but sometime in April 2026 concludes with the most cynical argument imaginable. Point E, quote, the government's proposal conflicts with other cases. And it then lists things like the civil case in New York against Trump beginning this October, and another next January, and the Stormy Daniels Payoff trial in March, and the Georgia trial next March, and the Mar-a-Lago trial starting next May. You can't put me on trial for my crimes in January. I'm already on trial for my crimes in New York and Atlanta and Florida. You people act like you're the only prosecutor and the only judge in town. I'm already booked that month. It is the goddamned real-life version of that worn-out cliche, the man murders his parents and then demands mercy because he's an orphan. Trump needs 2 extra years, 2 years, to prepare for this trial because he's such a relentless, lawless, amoral bastard that he has to spend 2 years preparing for all the other trials. And, of course, preparing his insurrectionists for all the other trials. I mean, what was the now canceled next Monday news conference at which he was to replace the lies and fraud that just got him indicted in Georgia with new lies and fraud? What was that but a call, stochastic as always, for more violence and more interference against the rule of law? And his lawyers got him to cancel that because there's plenty of time for Fani Willis to add more counts. But they didn't tell him that. To get him to cancel it, they had to convince him he had not made a near-fatal mistake, that he would be even smarter to use those materials, not at a press conference, but in court filings, and the news conference is no longer necessary! ! I'm so smart! Not only does Trump's worldview rest on his own infallibility, but so does much of the cult's worldview. These memes depicting him as triumphant or escorted by lions or anointed by God. These are not just chintzy advertising for the stupid. It is the way he, like all authoritarians in human history, sees himself and the way most of his cultists see him. Yesterday, a Trump cultist who runs the family bulldozer company and also insists he is an internationally acclaimed auctioneer. And if you're looking for a skill set for a Trumpist or an actual Trump, what better than combining bulldozing and auctioneering? This guy wrote to the governor, wrote in his capacity as the Georgia state senator from District 53. It's a high number, so it's better. He insisted that, quote, an emergency exists in the affairs of the state requiring a special session of the Senate to be convened for all purposes to include without limitation the review and response to the actions of Fani Willis, unquote. The kid's name is Colton Moore, and sure, his eyes appear to be on opposite sides of his head, and yeah, the letter reads, "We the undersigned," and yeah, it's hilarious that down at the bottom of the page, he's the only one who signed it. He's the only undersigned. But this is nothing less than a merger of state-sponsored obstruction of justice with Trump-sponsored obstruction of justice, because Moore had no sooner put out that letter than this cracker was being amplified by the Trump echo chamber in the person of Big Head Charlie Kirk and making his call to defund the district attorney's office and impeach the district attorney because she is, quote, targeting Donald Trump, unquote, which is what a district attorney is supposed to do, target goddamned criminals, especially the heads of goddamned organized crime operations. And bluntly, if you stick out your leg and try to trip her by extra-constitutional means, whether that is an insurrection at the Capitol or proposing a special session of the Georgia Senate, you must be charged criminally. It was great to see Fani Willis's office put out a statement yesterday saying it will respond quickly to any credible threat against the grand jurors who've been doxxed. Well, this is a credible threat. Now the district attorney needs to put out a statement saying it has opened a case against State Senator Colton Moore for obstruction of justice, and also an investigation of the undersigned, if there are any. I keep using this term, and goddamn it, I mean it. The law has to crush Donald Trump. This nation has had 8 years of one man who is trying to discontinue gravity, and who, because we are playing by rules that he does not recognize and has found roots around, he has risen to the extremes of political and personal power in our nation. He has committed an ongoing and unceasing crime wave that would have made Al Capone blush, and as he prepares to do it again, only this time with all of the benefits of seeing the loopholes and potholes in his own past schemes, we are approaching Trump daintily again. If I was in Fonnie Willis's job, I would have tried to get this fop Colton Moore indicted yesterday. If I was the governor or attorney general of Arizona, I wouldn't respond to this video of Kelly Ward and the other state lawmakers signing false electoral college documents and convicting themselves of being part of Trump's fake electors scheme. I wouldn't respond to that by saying, as Governor Hobbs has now said, I have been an advocate for holding folks involved in trying to overturn the will of the voters in the 2020 election accountable. I would be indicting Ward and the others and Trump today. Do it today for, if no other reason, look how full his criminal trial dance card already is. If I was in Judge Tanya Chutkan's role, I would have already had Trump seized and detained for making threats against the prosecutor and the judge repeatedly and in direct contravention of my orders within 24 hours of my ordering those orders, just like she would have seized and detained literally any other defendant in this country who threatened a judge. If I was in Adam Schiff's position, I would not go on cable news and announce that we will be defeating Trump at the polls. I would emphasize that just last week, 2 ultra-conservative constitutional scholars determined that not only is Trump ineligible to go to those polls under the language of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, but that it is not a debate. It does not have to be adjudicated. It is as obvious and as binding as the requirement that anybody who wants to be president has to be at least 35 years old. Adam Schiff and every Democrat should be publicizing Trump's ineligibility at every opportunity, and every Democratic state secretary of state should be quoting the conservative scholars and saying, the Constitution does not allow me to put Trump on my state's presidential ballot. My hands are tied here, so I'm not going to do that. And let the fascists go to court to try to overturn your ruling. And when they do, you come back and you propose a case calendar in which the trial about whether or not Trump should be on the 2024 presidential ballot, that trial begins when Trump has just revealed he is next available in April 2026. And I say all this because it is clearer than ever, and his motives for doing so are more numerous than ever, that Donald Trump is running because if he is not elected, he will die in prison. And he knows it, and he is running to assume power and to never give it up. Because if he gives it up, no matter what he has done to the criminal cases in the interim, he will have necessarily committed more and worse crimes and probably by then have tried to kill us all, and we can try him for all the new stuff. And we need to throw everything we have at him. Lawsuits, state cases, Arizona, Georgia, document trials, insurrection trials, the 14th Amendment, and if we can't keep him off the ballot, the goddamnedest series of campaign ads in the history of the world. Ones that will make LBJ's Daisy ad and Bush's Willie Horton ad look more milquetoast than I Like Ike. And right now we are not doing this. Judge Chutkan is silent. This bozo in Georgia, Moore, has that staged to himself. Adam Schiff is not mentioning the 14th Amendment, and President Biden has ordered his people to stay above the fray as if that is possible, or smart, or merely not incredibly stupid. We are still bringing to life the line from that Star Wars film. I hope, after you've lost, and the Empire reigns over the galaxy unopposed, you will find some comfort in the knowledge that you fought according to the rules. Also of note here, the sports washing of the corrupt leader of Saudi Arabia, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and of his entire nation, that has now been expanded to Brit washing. The UK Prime Minister has invited him to visit London. Happily, this Prime Minister is so bad at his job that one of the dates he has offered for the visit is the 5th anniversary of the Saudis murdering Jamal Khashoggi. That's next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Postscripts to the news. Some headlines, some updates, some snark, some predictions. Dateline London. Britain's fifth-string prime minister, well, Cameron, May, Johnson, lettuce woman, Sunak, Rishi Sunak, ringing the bell on the tone-deaf strength machine. Sunak has invited to his nation for an official visit the smirking Saudi Arabian strongman, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, right in the middle of his effort to sports-wash Saudi crimes, sports-wash them in the UK and the US. Happily, Sunak is the fifth-string prime minister, so the dates for the visit that he proposed are reportedly all in the first half of October. So even if Sunak and the prince don't hit it exactly, he will be visiting England on or about the 5th anniversary from October 2nd, 2018, of the day the journalist Jamal Khashoggi was lured to the Saudi embassy in Istanbul, and then, golly, we don't know what happened next. He must just accidentally collided with our bone saw, our embassy bone saw. Dateline Charlotte. Quite the story from that city's WRAL television. 11 years ago, a landlord there was having trouble with one of his renters. Went to court, got them evicted for non-payment. They still have not paid. They owe $2,000. WRAL talked to the landlord and then reported it this way, quote, "Those former tenants could be North Carolina's next governor and first lady." That's right. The people who skipped out were current Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson and his wife. Robinson, the hardline, right pretend tough guy, now running for governor. And his spokesman says that the fault for the landlord not getting his too large is the landlord's. It's the landlord's fault. Mike Lonergan, quote, "The court did not order for him to recover any rent or damages. There is a legal process for that, and the landlord did not pursue it within the statute of limitations," unquote. Bravo. Bravo, sir. The next governor of North Carolina got away with not paying the rent, and it's the landlord's fault. Trump will send Robinson a card of congratulations for that one. And Dateline New York. You may have noticed that the Democrats here in Fun City and the Empire State are among the worst in the country, points vaguely towards Mayor Eric Adams as he kisses his reflection in a mirror. Well, even for them, this is a doozy. The Brooklyn Democratic Party not only put Judge Rachel Fryer on the Supreme Court as an acting justice, but it has now made her one of their candidates, one of their Democratic candidates for a full-time post on the Supreme Court. And the way things work here, because the Democrats have all the power and none of the brains, that means she will get onto the court. And 10 years ago, Judge Fryer wrote an op-ed in The Forward expressing her opposition to Roe v. Wade. A woman judge, opposed to choice, nominated to the state Supreme Court by the Democrats. If you have extra Democrats in your town, good ones, please ship them to New York Democratic Party, 1 Mario but not Andrew Cuomo Plaza, Albany, New York, 60605. Addressee will pay postage. Still ahead to thank you for your kind comments about yesterday's stories of my late puppy Mishu, and today is Mishu Day. Let me pay tribute to the pure joy of dogs, even the difficult ones, in Fridays with Thurber and the dog that bit people. First time for the daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's worst persons in the world. The bronze, Project Veritas. That which is all that remains of the career of the OG, original grifter, little Jimmy O'Keefe. It looks like it's nearing the end, like it's about to go out of business. When O'Keefe was ousted for having spent all the company money on musicals in which he starred, his colleague Hannah Giles took over. Yesterday, somebody tweeted on the Project Veritas account, SOS, Hannah Giles just fired us all. However, the tweet was then deleted, proving, well, not all. Didn't fire all of them. Somebody was left to delete the tweet, right? Runners-up, the Washington Post. Both sidesism and fear of having to answer angry emails is going to destroy this country. The Post had two of the dumbest, most bend-over, so far backwards you fall on your face headlines in world history in the same issue. A style writer named Ben Terrace penned a ridiculous piece claiming the less smooth among us have a role model in Ron DeSantis. The headline, "Awkward Americans see themselves in Ron DeSantis." Seriously. Meanwhile, same issue, Trump flatters himself, calls himself a counterpuncher, when in fact, if he had a boxing move, it would be a disqualifying jab to the groin. The Post headline about that tripe takes that statement as if it's fact. Trump follows tested counterpuncher playbook in face of indictments. Washington Post, can I have an article about me in which I call myself the greatest man in the history of the world, and then you put the headline on it, "World's greatest man ever continues to be great"? But our winner, for the second time in just 3 days, Sage Steele, my fired former SportsCenter co-host, briefly, thank God. She was on Megyn Kelly's radio show for the whole 2 hours. First of all, to listen to Megyn Kelly, one of the most despised people in the history of NBC, complaining about anybody else is torture enough. But then to hear Sage Steele, one of the most despised people in the history of ESPN, complaining about anybody else, alongside Megyn Kelly. Can I get those knitting needles for my ears now? Wednesday's Worst Person winner, and how my email inbox and text filled up with messages from grateful old friends. She's back. The headline from this, her latest Kvetch Fest: she had to sue ESPN because they treated her differently than they treated the rest of us on-air talent. When we talked about things like Black Lives Matter or social justice, we got a pass. But when she talked about exactly the same thing, like why Barack Obama was allowed to identify as black, she got in trouble. First of all, we didn't get any passes. I went back there in 2018 not only willing to keep sports and non-sports separate, but wanting to. Periodically, I'd still get notes from management saying, "Look, this news development just happened," and asking, "You're not planning on saying anything, are you?" And I would say, "No, that's why I took the job." Plus, if you think supporting Black Lives Matter and trashing Obama over his racial self-identification are the same thing, you are dumber than I thought. And do you know how much work that takes? On the other hand, Sage Steele said, quote, "I refuse to be quiet about this anymore." Wait, that was her being quiet? I don't believe there are any witnesses to any period of time in human history when she's been quiet. She added, "I don't care anymore because this is my experience. I'm allowed to feel the way I feel." And then finally, "When you try to silence me, I'm done." Sage, quote, "I'm done," unquote. Well, she got that part of it right. Steele, today's worst person in the world! To the number one story on the countdown and Fridays with Thurber, and it's amazing to me in retrospect how I read all of his wonderful, realistic, not goopy writing about dogs, and enjoyed it thoroughly years before I was ever adopted by a dog. Now, reading his dog stories and anecdotes is like reading about a bunch of friends, even that one surly friend for whom we must continuously make excuses. The Dog That Bit People by James Thurber. Probably no one man should have as many dogs in this life as I have had, but there was more pleasure than distress in them for me, except in the case of an Airedale named Muggs. He gave me more trouble than all the other 54 or 5 put together, although my moment of keenest embarrassment was the time a Scotch Terrier named Jeannie, who had just had 6 puppies in the clothes closet of a 4th-floor apartment in New York, had the unexpected 7th and last at the corner of 11th Street and 5th Avenue during a walk she had insisted on taking. Then, too, there was the prize-winning French poodle, a giant big black poodle, none of your little untroublesome white miniatures, who got sick riding in the rumble seat of a car with me on her way to the Greenwich Dog Show. She had a red rubber bib tucked around her throat, and since a rainstorm came up when we were halfway through the Bronx, I had to hold over her a small green umbrella, really more of a parasol. The rain beat down fearfully, and suddenly the driver of the car drove into a big garage filled with mechanics. It happened so quickly that I forgot to put the umbrella down. And I will always remember with sickening distress the look of incredulity mixed with hatred that came over the face of the particular hardened garage man that came over to see what we wanted when he took a look at me and the poodle. All garage men and people of that intolerant stripe hate poodles with their curious haircuts, especially the pom-poms that you got to leave on their hips if you expect the dogs to win a prize. But the Airedale, as I have said, was the worst of all my dogs. He really wasn't my dog, matter of fact. I came home from a vacation one summer to find that my brother Roy had bought him while I was away. A big, burly, choleric dog. He always acted as if he thought I wasn't one of the family. There was a slight advantage in being one of the family, for he didn't bite the family as often as he bit strangers. Still, in the years that we had him, he bit everybody but Mother, and he made a pass at her once but missed. It was during the month when we suddenly had mice, and Muggs refused to do anything about them. Nobody ever had mice exactly like the mice we had that month. They acted like pet mice, almost like mice somebody had trained. They were so friendly that one night when Mother entertained at dinner the Freeralilas, a club she and my father had belonged to for 20 years, she put down a lot of little dishes with food in them on the pantry floor so that the mice would be satisfied with that and would not come into the dining room. Muggs stayed out in the pantry with the mice, lying on the floor, growling to himself, not at the mice, but about all the people in the next room that he would have liked to get at. Mother slipped out into the pantry once to see how everything was going. Everything was going fine. It made her so mad to see Muggs lying there, oblivious of the mice. They came running up to her, that she slapped him. And he slashed at her but didn't make it. He was sorry immediately, Mother said. He was always sorry, she said, after he bit someone, but we could not understand how she figured this out. He didn't act sorry. Mother used to send a box of candy every Christmas to the people the Airedale bit. The list, finally, contained 40 or more names. Nobody could understand why we did not get rid of the dog. I didn't understand it very well myself, but we didn't get rid of him. I think that 1 or 2 people tried to poison Muggs. He acted poisoned once in a while, and old Major Moberly fired at him once with his service revolver near the Seneca Hotel in East Broad Street. But Muggs lived to almost 11 years old, and even when he could hardly get around, he bit a congressman who had called to see my father on business. My mother had never liked the congressman. She said the signs of his horoscope showed he couldn't be trusted. He was Saturn with the moon in Virgo. But she sent him a box of candy that Christmas anyway. He sent it right back, probably because he suspected it was trick candy. Mother persuaded herself that it was all for the best that the dog had bitten him, even though Father lost an important business association because of it. I wouldn't be associated with such a man, Mother said. Muggs could read him like a book. We used to take turns feeding Muggs to be on his good side, but that didn't always work. He was never in a very good humor even after a meal. Nobody knew exactly what was the matter with him, but whatever it was, it made him irascible, especially in the mornings. Roy, my brother, never felt very well in the morning either, especially before breakfast, and once when he came downstairs and found that Muggs had moodily chewed up the morning paper, He hit him in the face with a grapefruit and then jumped up on the dining room table, scattering dishes and silverware and spilling the coffee. Muggs' first free leap carried him all the way across the table and into a brass fire screen in front of the gas grate. But he was back on his feet in a moment, and in the end he got Roy and gave him a pretty vicious bite in the leg. Then he was all over it. He never bit anyone more than once at a time. Mother always mentioned that as an argument in his favor. She said he had a quick temper, but that he didn't hold a grudge. She was forever defending him. I think she liked him because he wasn't well. He's not strong, she would say pityingly. But that was inaccurate. He may not have been well, but he was terribly strong. One time my mother went to the Chittenden Hotel to call on a woman mental healer who was lecturing in Columbus on the subject of harmonious vibrations. She wanted to find out if it was possible to get harmonious vibrations into a dog. He's a large tan-colored Airedale, Mother explained. The woman said that she had never treated a dog, but she advised my mother to hold the thought that he did not bite and would not bite. Mother was holding the thought the very next morning when Muggs got the Iceman, but she blamed that slip-up on the Iceman. If you didn't think he would bite you, he wouldn't, Mother told him. He stomped out of the house in a terrible jangle of vibrations. One morning when Muggs bit me slightly, more or less in passing, I reached down and grabbed his short, stumpy tail and hoisted him into the air. It was a foolhardy thing to do, and the last time I saw my mother, about 6 months ago, she said she didn't know what possessed me. I don't either, except that I was pretty mad. As long as I held the dog off the floor by his tail, he couldn't get at me, but he twisted and jerked so, snarling all the time, that I realized I couldn't hold him that way very long. I carried him into the kitchen and flung him onto the floor and shut the door on him just as he crashed against it. But I forgot about the back stairs. Muggs went up the back stairs and down the front stairs and had me cornered in the living room. I managed to get up onto the mantelpiece above the fireplace, but it gave way and came down with a tremendous crash, throwing a large marble clock, several vases, and myself heavily to the floor. Muggs was so alarmed by the racket that when I picked myself up, he had disappeared. We couldn't find him anywhere, although we whistled and shouted, until old Mrs. Detweiler called after dinner that night. Muggs had bitten her once in the leg, and she came into the living room only after we assured her that Muggs had run away. She had just seated herself when, with great growling and scratching of claws, Muggs emerged from under a davenport where he had been quietly hiding all the time and bit her again. Mother examined the bite and put arnica on it and told Mrs. Detweiler that it was only a bruise. "He just bumped you," she said. But Mrs. Detweiler left our house in a nasty state of mind. Lots of people reported our Airedale to the police, but my father held a municipal office at the time and was on friendly terms with the police. Even so, the cops had been out a couple of times, once when Muggs bit Mrs. Rufus Sturdivant, and again when he bit Lieutenant Governor Malloy. But Mother told them it hadn't been Muggs's fault, but the fault of the people who were bitten. "When he starts for them, they scream," she explained, "and that excites him." The cops suggested that it might be a good idea to tie the dog up, but Mother said that it mortified him to be tied up and that he wouldn't eat when he was tied up. Muggs at his meals was an unusual sight because of the fact that if you reached toward the floor, he would bite you. We usually put his food plate on top of an old kitchen table with a bench alongside the table. Muggs would stand on the bench and eat. I remember that my mother's Uncle Horatio, who boasted that he was the third man up Missionary Ridge, was splutteringly indignant when he found out that we fed the dog on a table because we were afraid to put his plate on the floor. He said he wasn't afraid of any dog that ever lived, and that he would put the dog's plate on the floor if we would give it to him. Roy said that if Uncle Horatio had fed Muggs on the ground just before the battle, he would have been the first man up Missionary Ridge. Uncle Horatio was furious. "Bring him in! Bring him in now!" he shouted. "I'll feed the on the floor." Roy was all for giving him a chance, but my father wouldn't hear of it. He said that Muggs had already been fed. "I'll feed him again!" bawled Uncle Horatio. We had quite a time quieting him. In his last year, Muggs used to spend practically all of his time outdoors. He didn't like to stay in the house for some reason or other. Perhaps it held too many unpleasant memories for him. Anyway, it was hard to get him to come in, and as a result, the garbage man, the ice man, and the laundry man would not come near our house. We had to haul the garbage down to the corner, take the laundry out and bring it back, and meet the ice man a block from home. After this had gone on for some time, we hit on an ingenious arrangement for getting the dog in the house so that we could lock him up while the gas meter was read and so on. Muggs was afraid of only one thing: an electrical storm. Thunder and lightning frightened him out of his senses. I think he thought a storm had broken the day the mantelpiece fell. He would rush into the house and hide under a bed or in a clothes closet. So we fixed up a thunder machine out of a long, narrow piece of sheet iron with a wooden handle on one end. Mother would shake this vigorously when she wanted to get Muggs into the house. It made an excellent imitation of thunder, but I suppose it was the most roundabout system for running a household that was ever devised. It took a lot out of Mother. A few months before Muggs died, he got to seeing things. He would rise slowly from the floor, growling low, and stalk stiff-legged and menacing toward nothing at all. Sometimes the thing would be just a little to the right or left of a visitor. Once a Fuller brush salesman got hysterics. Muggs came wandering into the room like Hamlet following his father's ghost. His eyes were fixed on a spot just to the left of the Fuller brush man, who stood it until Muggs was about 3 slow, creeping paces from him. Then he shouted. Muggs wavered on past him into the hallway, grumbling to himself, but the Fuller man went on shouting. I think Mother had to throw a pan of cold water on him before he stopped. That was the way she used to stop us boys when we got into fights. Muggs died quite suddenly one night. Mother wanted to bury him in the family lot under a marble stone with some such inscription as "Flights of angels sing thee to thy rest," but we persuaded her it was against the law. In the end, we just put up a smooth board above his grave along a lonely road. On the board I wrote with an indelible pencil, "Cave Canem." Mother was quite pleased with the simple, classic dignity of the old Latin epitaph. The Dog That Bit People by James Thurber. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Countdown has come to you from our studios high atop the Sports Capsule building in New York. Here are the credits. Most of the music was arranged, produced, and performed by Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel, who are the Countdown musical directors. All orchestration and keyboards by John Philip Chanel. Guitars, bass, and drums by Brian Ray, produced by TKO Brothers. Other Beethoven selections have been arranged and performed by No Horns Allowed. The sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc. Musical comments by Nancy Faust, the best baseball stadium organist ever. Our announcer today was my friend Larry David. Everything else is pretty much my fault. Thanks, Countdown, for this, the 954th day since Donald Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Arrest him again while we still can. The next scheduled Countdown is tomorrow. Bulletins as the news warrants. Till then, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.
No, I asked you to get back.
No, you did not. You came in, you flew in, and you were f***ing full-on dick.
I did ask you to get back, and you didn't get back.
You better recalculate, mother. Multiple people asked you to get back.